All right, we are now recording.
Okay.
Hello, my name is Asha Clarke with the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program. Today is July 13th, 2023. It's about 2:13 p.m. and I'm interviewing, well, he's going to introduce himself in a second, but we're here in Elaine, Arkansas at the Elaine Legacy Center. So I'm also here today with
Lorena Manasturean.
Could you start out by introducing yourself and spelling your name for us, please?
Andrew Shears Sr. Andrewshers Sr.
Thank you so much. And could you begin by telling us a little bit about where you grew up, what you do?
I grew up south, 16 miles south of here in a place called Crumrod, Crumrod, Arkansas / Ferguson, Arkansas, which you guys heard him talk about in the discussion earlier. My family members were the Fergusons, the Douglas, and the Shears. Shears by my biological father, Douglas, my biological mother, and the Fergusons were distant family members who founded the Ferguson area.
Could you talk a little bit about the Ferguson area and what that means for
small farming community? Everybody was farming community. It was a farming community. Everybody knew each other. We were raised by very strict and stern group of people. Most of them were somewhat religious. So my father was a Methodist minister, so he was very stern, very strict. But we were all farmers. My grandfather was probably the largest black farmer in that area. And we spent 4.5 years in litigation trying to get out because the land was pretty much taken from my father. A guy would come get him drunk, get him to sign papers. My grandfather had a trust for him, so he wouldn't read a lot of the stuff that he was signing. We lost the land, pretty much had lost it. My mom sold her land to get it into litigation. We stayed in litigation 4.5 years. We did get it back, but got it back. My grandfather turned it into our property. Our property is property that you can't get a loan against, and land that you can't get money against or you can't borrow against relatively has no value unless you're going to stay there and farm. All my siblings had moved away. I farmed for 4 or 5 years after my grandfather died, and at that point, I saw that I was losing my shirt because I couldn't get loans from the FHA. So I had to go through other lending institutions, and the interest rate was so high that it forced me out of farming. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so.
What is the FHA?
The FHA, Future Farmers of America. Future Farmers of America is what it is. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. And we heard about Ferguson, the place, but you mentioned earlier the Ferguson clan. Could you talk a little bit about who these people were, your family?
Hassan Ferguson was the older farmer, the one that I can remember the most, him and Sally Ferguson, which lived about half a mile from where I lived. And they were also farmers, but lost their land to through the same type process, pretty much. Yeah.
And who or what owns this land now?
The land that we farmed, George Williamson, which was a young Caucasian farmer who started farming around the same time I started farming. He ended up selling it because he leased it for many years. So once we got it back in litigation, my grandfather started to break it up, give his kids part. Me and my siblings were the only 4 grandkids that got land. We only got 10 acres, but after years and years of this land splitting off, because with each generation, it split off. So pretty soon the land is not going to be worth the check that it's printed on. So we all decided and agreed to just go ahead and sell it. So we ended up selling it to George Williamson, who still owns it now and still farms it now. Yeah. So.
And you mentioned that you were a farmer for some time, but you don't do that anymore.
I was what?
You were a farmer for some time?
Yeah. I farmed myself. Well, I grew up on the farm. That was my life. But after my father died in 1975, I took the farm over, and I farmed it for approximately 5 years.
And what did you do after those
I
5
moved to
years?
California,
California?
Yeah.
Where in California?
Oakland,
What
San
did you-
Francisco Bay Area.
What did you do there?
Hustled.
Awesome.
To be honest with you. Off the record, I guess. Anyway, but that's what I did, so yeah.
And what brought you back to Arkansas?
When I left with the intention of coming back. My intention was to go to California, earn enough money to come back and pay down on 10 trucks. That was my dream. Needless to say, I got sidetracked, got into bling, and so ended up going to jail, that type stuff. So, and so I ended up 3 years ago in December. I'll be back here 3 years in December. I moved back to the Helena area.
Okay, so you came back recently.
Yeah.
And I can imagine that the Helena area was one way when you left and you came back and maybe found
Booming
it.
city, boom. This whole, all the way from Snow Lake all the way up was a booming community. I mean, there were people everywhere. You passed through Elaine, this small town. When I left here, the population was 2,280 people. Now it's 600, according to the sign, 600 something. So there's no opportunity here. So people, when they graduate, they leave. I can't blame them. It's nothing for young people to do.
And what do you think caused this shift in population in commerce?
Monetary issues. Certain everybody, the rich getting richer, the poor's getting poor. Pretty much all over all over America. Regentrification is all over the world, all over America. Yeah. I'm looking at Helena now. They tore the projects in Helena down. So I'm wondering, normally what I've seen in the major cities, the projects come down, condominiums, townhouses come up, and they start at $1.5 million and up. Who can afford that if you're poor? Yeah, so.
And what other changes did you notice after coming back?
All the businesses left. There are no business here. There are no businesses here, period. As far as I'm concerned, integration, and there's nothing towards the people here, integration was the beginning of the black man's demise in this area, because before integration, we owned. It gave black people the illusion that they had arrived. And it was nothing more than but then our presence had become tolerated. But that was it. There was nothing else there. We still couldn't get loans. We still couldn't get good housing. So we were redlined. So it was pretty much the same. The same things that I saw happening 60 years ago is happening in this area now, just with a different twist. Yeah.
And what tactics do they use nowadays, would you say, to hide the overt racism?
It's still, okay, we'll give you a loan, let us do the application, but you never get the money. As a matter of fact, I was speaking to Victor, who's a farmer out in Marvel, Arkansas. He's been approved for a loan. He's been approved for a loan, but never got the check. He was approved on paper, but never received a check. So it's the same tactics are being used that was used then. Anyway, all the black farmers now have pretty much lost their land. I think the Joneses, the young kids that are in there now, Elijah's family, I think they still got their land. But other than that, I think most of the people that own land knows that back then, some white guy has it or some corporation has it. Yeah. David Brooke Griffin was a kid I went to school with when forced integration was started. He owns, well, at first it was his dad, owned everything from Snow Lake all the way up here. All the implement companies, all the granaries, everything. David Brooke Griffin's family owned it all. Now David himself owns it.
And what was life like growing up in Elaine before forced integration?
We were happy. We were proud, black-owned business owners, barbershop, local grocery stores. We pretty much policed our own. If there was an incident in the community, when the police came, they went to the leading members of the community and talked to them before they came in and stormed the house or arrested somebody. They came in and got a story before they did. They came to the leading community members of the community before they come in and bombarded somebody's house.
And these police officers were white?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. We've had a few black, but because you're black, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're for us. We got a black mayor, but nothing is happening on the north side of town.
And so how old were you when integration started happening?
Forced integration started, I want to say, my freshman year in high school. There were only 4 families in the entire school system. There were 2 schools up at the tracks, up where you cross over on the north side of town. That was the black school. And when forced integration came about, my father forced me and my siblings to come. He said, well, I'm a leading member of the community. If you guys don't step up, it's not going to happen. So there were 4 families, the Shears, the Jackson, the Sullivans. Can't remember who the 4th one was, but it was only 4 black people, 4 black families in the whole school system. Then a few years later, forced integration happened. And so that's when they integrated the 2 schools.
And what was that like?
Hell, mistreatment, being called the N-word, people had to have to sit at a certain position on the bus, all that type. It was just nonsense. Having to fight to get in classrooms, you know.
And before forced integration, did you feel significant differences between the white schools and the black schools?
Well, we didn't really know anything about the white community. We pretty much couldn't, if we tried to walk, that little restaurant here up here by the dollar store, I don't know if you guys came in by the dollar store, there's a little restaurant. We couldn't go inside. We were served through a window. It's only the last couple of years or so that we were able to go into that place. And now I have no desire to go in it whatsoever. If you didn't want me back then, my money's not good with you.
And back in that time when your father said, listen, I'm a leading member of the community, you have to go, how did you feel about being used as kind of this example?
Well, you know, I didn't challenge my father. I knew not to, really, but I didn't challenge him at all. If he said it was a thing we was going to do, then that's just what it was. We didn't question our father. He was very stern. He had few words, and when he said what he said, that's what it was. We didn't question it. So I came, and you know, I played basketball for him and football for a while. Didn't do the football long, but I started basketball. Started on the basketball team, and it was a lot of racial tension. The principal and the teachers were unfair. I got kicked out of school quite a bit because I was so vocal and somewhat violent. I still am somewhat, but I've learned to deal with it and put it in perspective. And you know, I've talked to some people about concerning the violent part of me, you know, because I believe in putting boots on the ground. I believe in, okay, let's burn it all down, start all over, start on with an even playing field. Okay, so we're up. By the time I saw the light go out. Okay.
Not quite time
Not
up, but this boots on the ground concept, would you like to expand a little bit more on what you mean by that?
I think we should, if it was taken from you, take it back. And to take it back, I said that inside, by any means necessary. And if that means going to war, another civil war in America, I think that's what needs to happen. Burn it all down. Let's all start with an even playing field. We cannot have an even playing field if we started 400 years in the rear. Can't happen. It will never be even.
And is that specific to Arkansas, to the South?
Specific to the United States, period. I mean, it's just not here. It's the same in California. It's the same in New York. It's the same in Tennessee. And all these places I'm talking, I've lived. Detroit, it's the same. California is just so nonchalant. I like it, but I'm still stabbing you in the back. You know, I'm not saying all whites are good, all blacks are good. I'm prejudiced. I am prejudiced, but I'm a prejudiced to all people, not just the white, but to anybody that mistreats me. I don't like you. I got a problem with you. Okay.
And how would you characterize anti-Black prejudice in Detroit or Tennessee? You mentioned California. What was it like in those other places you lived?
There was a lot of black-on black prejudice in the South. It's a lot of white black prejudice in California. You say, but it's so settled that those who didn't grow up in this area or in the environment I do, they miss it. My nephews that grew up in California, my son who basically grew up in California, they don't see or feel. I can walk into a store and feel the thickness in there. Nobody has to say nothing. I can walk in and I can tell I'm not wanted here. Okay, because of the things that I've experienced in life. Okay.
And any fight that you're a proponent of, what does this have to do with the water scarcity in this area? Is that another issue that
I'm not understanding the question.
So boots on the ground, you have to fight for what was once yours.
Yeah.
And how does this relate to the struggle with water scarcity in this area?
The water scarcity, I think that's everybody's issue. That's not just a white, black issue. That's a people issue. So I don't have no problem with that. I'm for fighting for it, but it's not my biggest fight. There's a lot of things that takes precedence over that water fight. Like I said, I will never go hungry a day in my life. Neither will anybody I love, because I'll knock on your door and ask for it. I'll ask for it the right way. When I come back, let me get that. And that's on everything I love. I put that on everything I love. I will take it if I have to. Okay.
And what are some of the issues that you believe take precedence over the water issues? Is land ownership one of them?
Land ownership, business ownership, equality in the lending processes, equality where the police is concerned. Stop killing us in the street. Stop profiling us. I've experienced all of this firsthand, so, and I have issues with it. So I just try to stay, I go to work and go home, just stay out of the way, because I know I have these issues, and it don't take much to ignite it. I said I have a violent tendency, so, and that's not to say that I'm anybody in here, okay? I do have a violent streak in me, and I know it. So it doesn't take much to push me over the edge. So I just go home and go to work. Stay out of the way.
I think you first mentioned this violent streak, so to speak, to us when you spoke about speaking up after forced integration in high school. What kinds of issues or injustices did you speak up about during school?
You mean in the high school system? It was day and night. The whites were treated one way, the blacks were treated another way. We couldn't get anything done. The things that at the time, paddling was still in effect. People would take these big boards and they would want to paddle. I wouldn't have it. You ain't even hit me no board. I'm sorry, sir. My dad don't whoop me. You are not getting ready to put that paddle on me, so I would get kicked out of school. Other kids would take it. I would, When they do the preamble to the Constitution, I would say justice for white folks. It's top of my voice. So this battle hasn't just started. It's been going on all my life. And to have people that I was fighting for grew up to tell me, man, I couldn't stand you in school. You was a troublemaker. You always kept shit going. Well, man, I was fighting for us. I wasn't just fighting for me. But they didn't see that. And it's like I told Ms. Olson a couple of weeks ago, the fight is just about left out of me. I'm tired of fighting for people who don't want to fight for themselves, or who's afraid to fight for themselves, or have become complacent and just don't care. Okay.
What issues have people in your community become complacent about that you wish? Which issues have people become too complacent about that you wish they would?
Fairness, justice. They just settle for whatever. They don't try to do anything to change it. And as far as I'm concerned, the political process does not work. It doesn't matter if Biden is the president, if Trump is president. It's all bullshit as far as I'm concerned. Excuse my French. I don't know if I can say that on camera. It's all bullshit. When I heard Winford Rockefeller say, when I was a young kid, Winford Rockefeller was asked if he would run for president. And he said, and do what? Step down in office. He said, whomever I select, whether I do so publicly or privately, becomes the president of the United States. So to me, it tells me they already chosen. That they just let us vote to let us believe that we're participating in the process. I doubt if we have any pull in the process at all. I think the electoral colleges should be. I think it should be the popular vote should elect the president. How states like Iowa got so many popular votes, so much influence, and it doesn't represent the masses of America. Okay.
And what was your experience, or maybe your family's experience, with access to voting growing up?
I used to believe in the voting system. I used to work the polls. I used to pick people up and take them back and forth to the poll. I wouldn't vote now to restore my rights. Like I said, I'm a felon, so I don't have a right, but I'm still taxed. And the Constitution says taxation without representation is bullshit. I don't have any representation, but you still you tax my check every time I make one. But I have no representation. So, like I said, the politics, all that's bullshit to me. Just being honest with you.
And thank you. We appreciate your honesty.
Okay.
I know you've already told us that water scarcity, that's not the biggest issue.
It's not one of my priorities. No, that's more of a people issue. I'm fighting for my people, and I know that sounds, but it's my people who's experienced all these injustices. So that's who I fight for. That's who I'm a champion for. Mm-hmm. You know, if everybody don't have water, then I'm fair. I'm good with that. But for you to cut my water off and not cut everybody's water, I have a problem with that. Mm-hmm. You know, if you're going to clean the water, so it's just not a black-white issue with the water. That's everybody's issue.
Mm-hmm. So you haven't noticed maybe heightened issues with water scarcity in Black Helena or Black Elaine communities?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Yeah. Water scarcity affects everybody, as you've already said, and that's why it's not really your biggest priority. Okay. But have you noticed, even within water scarcity, racial disparities within that?
Well, there's not a water shortage. It's not a water shortage. It's just a clean water shortage problem, issue. My water, when I first moved back here, I got a letter in the mail as soon as I moved back saying, do not drink the water from the tap. So I've been buying my water from ever since I've been back. You know, that's an issue. That's an issue of cost with me, mm-hmm. especially being a senior citizen and fixed income, except for this little income that I get here. So that's an issue for me, but it's one that I know that I have to deal with. I got to have water, so.
Yeah. And what would you do to change that, needing to buy bottled water?
It's really just a monetary issue because I do know I work for Crystal Cream and Butter in Sacramento, California. The water that they were selling as Mountain First water came straight out of the tap. The ice cream that they sold as the name brand ice cream and the inexpensive ice cream was the same ice cream. They shut the line down, changed the label, and kept it right in. So, okay.
Alrighty. Well, on behalf of the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program, thank you so much for sitting down
and
talking with us today.
I hope I haven't put you on a culture shock by
not at all.
aggressiveness, but I'm just being who I am.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And before we turn off the camera, stop recording, is there anything else you'd like to add or clarify that we haven't asked about?
I hope that I'll see a change before my demise, before I leave here. I just hope I see some significant change. And I thank you for your generation because you guys seem to care a little bit more than the previous generations. You seem to be a little bit more fair in wanting justice and equality than your predecessors. Okay? So thank you, ladies, for that.
Thank you so much.
Alrighty.
That was nice.